Superman might just be the most iconic superhero of all time, and he's had plenty of movies over the years to show for it, and every single one of them have managed to leave some sort of an impact, for better or worse. However, people tend to forget we had a really long dry spell without him in the movies. He didn't appear in a movie for 19 years between Superman 4 and Superman Returns. His movies just kept getting canceled on him. It was like he was cursed. But one of those canceled movies was actually going to be made in the early 2000s. It was supposedly going to be called Superman FLYBY, and it actually would have been written by J.J. Abrams, which is kind of funny because currently at the time of writing, he's actually directing a new Superman movie. But what if he didn't have to wait until now to do that? What if his plans for Superman had actually come to fruition, and we got a Superman movie back on the big screen even earlier? Simply put, what if J.J. Abrams' Superman was made? So somehow, J.J. Abrams' Superman movie actually ends up getting made in the early 2000s. So what would his vision have been like? Well, first of all, there's some things I need to clear up. It was not going to be called Superman FLYBY, as a lot of people call it. That was actually only its code name. It was actually going to be called Superman the Man of Steel, and it actually would not have been directed by Abrams, but instead by Mick G., best known for his work on the Charlie's Angels movies and Terminator Salvation. Although Mick G. would actually end up being replaced as director halfway through by Brett Ratner, the man behind the Rush Hour trilogy and X-Men The Last Stand, but then Mick G. came back again after Ratner's contract expired, and Mick G. finished his work on Charlie's Angels Full Throttle. So yeah, very confusing development process for sure. So now it is worth mentioning that the cast for this movie was never even close to being set in stone, but I'm going to try and sort through a bunch of names that I've heard with being thrown around for the different roles. So starting with Superman, of course, Warner's top choices seem to be Paul Walker, Brendan Fraser, Ashton Kutcher, Josh Hartnett, and Matt Bomer, just to name a few. They also considered future Supermen, funnily enough, including Brandon Routh and Henry Cavill, as well as Smallville Superman Tom Welling, and apparently if he had gotten the part, then Smallville would have actually been canceled, and it would have been considered non-canon, so good thing that didn't happen, right? Now for Lois Lane, we actually have even more actresses to get through, which include Natalie Portman, Cameron Diaz, Beyonce, Jennifer Lopez, Scarlett Johansson, Kerry Russell, Drew Barrymore, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and Lara Flynn Boyle, once again, just to name a few. Now, both Shia LaBeouf and Justin Timberlake were offered the role of Jimmy Olsen, Christopher Walken was supposedly going to be playing the role of Perry White, and Anthony Hopkins or Ray Fiennes was set to play the role of Jor-El. Now, for the main villains, we were of course going to be getting Lex Luthor, which makes a lot of sense, and for him, we actually have a couple of interesting choices, including Bruce Willis, Vin Diesel, and Robert Downey Jr. Anthony Hopkins was actually also offered the role of Lex Luthor instead of Jor-El if he changed his mind about it. Now, we were also going to be getting a movie-exclusive villain named Tyzor, who was going to be Superman's cousin and would have been played by Joel Edgerton. Now, the movie was actually set to be released in the summer of 2004, but would end up being pushed back to the summer of 2005 because casting was a bitch. So now, what would this movie have actually entailed plot-wise? Well, for starters, Krypton actually was not going to be destroyed in this version. Yeah, I know we're starting off with the controversial stuff early, and instead of being destroyed, it was actually going to be having a civil war between Jor-El and his brother Kata-Zor over the throne. Now, also before I forget, because I think this is really cool, the Kryptonians were actually going to have their own language in this movie. The language actually would have been created just for the movie, which I think is really, really cool, and it was just too good to not mention, honestly. Now, in this timeline, as I said, the El family are actually the royals of the planet Krypton, with the Zor family trying to seize it from them. So now Jor-El, realizing that the war is lost, his palace is crumbling around him, and his brother has won the throne, he decides that he doesn't want his son, his infant son, to be, a sacrifice in this war. So he launches him to Earth. He has no choice. He needs to save his son's life, and that's exactly what he does. So Kal-El crash lands in Smallville at 11 months old, and gets taken in by the Kent family like he usually does, and is named after actor Clark Gable. He displays his powers from a very young age and actually has to be taught how to blend in and not use his powers. Meanwhile, Jor-El and his wife Lara are being held prisoner by the Zors for years as they search the universe for Kal-El, knowing that he's definitely not dead. And yeah, they don't want any threats to their place on the throne. So now Kata-Zor actually has a son of his own named Tai-Zor, who grows up to be even more ruthless than his father, and even kills Lara when she refuses to confess where her son's pod was sent. So yeah, very, very brutal man, for sure. Now, Clark, meanwhile, learns to control his powers, and even goes to college, where he meets and develops an attraction for Lois Lane, before they then both get accepted for jobs at the Daily Planet, where Clark also makes best friends with Jimmy Olsen. Meanwhile, Lex Luthor has been slowly gaining control of the world's industries and attempts to corner the world's satellite supply under the guise of, global security, and Lois Lane, of course, is not buying that, and makes it her mission to destroy Lex Luthor and take him down. So now, in anger and frustration, Luthor tries to actually have her killed while she's on board Air Force One. He has one of his satellites actually shoot the plane down while she's interviewing the President of the United States. Clark actually finally decides in that moment to display his powers for the first time, and he catches the plane. And this plane rescue, by the way, was going to be pretty much exactly the same as the one we got in Superman Returns. The wing was going to break off, all that stuff was going to happen pretty much the exact same way that it did, which means it would have been great. One different aspect of it, though, is that Clark is really inexperienced when it comes to flying. He's barely flown, and that only makes it even more of a hassle to catch this plane, which I think would have been pretty interesting. But in the end, he does manage to save the plane and is branded Superman by the Daily Planet, as he always is. So now after this incident, the Kent family finally explain how they found him, and they finally give him his suit which was in the pod with him. Meanwhile, while this is going on, it actually turns out that Lex Luthor managed to actually get a hold of the pod that brought Clark to Earth, and he uses it to relay a signal to Tai-Zor that Kal-El is on Earth, because he now realizes that Superman is a threat to his plans and he wants to get rid of him. So now meanwhile, Superman initially doesn't know if he wants to be a hero, but is convinced to do so when he can't shake these sounds he's hearing with his supersonic hearing. The sounds of pain and suffering, of cries for help. He can't ignore it any longer. So he goes all around the world performing good deed after good deed and establishing himself as a beloved global icon. Lex Luthor, meanwhile, kidnaps Lois Lane and brings her before Tai-Zor, who he immediately begins just bowing down and worshipping. He's a smart man indeed. Superman arrives to rescue Lois, and he gets into a fight with his own cousin, and ends up actually leveling a good portion of Metropolis in the process. In the end, Superman actually gets killed by Lex Luthor when he stabs him with kryptonite. But in the end, he's actually saved by his father Jor-El, who communicates with him via telepathic link and offers up his life force to bring Superman back from the dead. He sacrifices himself to save his son. So now, a newly reinvigorated Superman who's finally met his proper father for the first time, and the one time he meets him, he did this very noble sacrificial thing for him. He is very empowered, very reinvigorated, and he absolutely kicks Tai-Zor's ass. In the end, the fight ends with Tai-Zor accidentally impaling himself on a shard of kryptonite. So Superman does not have to kill him, but he does, in the end, die. So then Superman ends the movie by deciding that he needs to return to Krypton in order to face his uncle Kata-Zor and liberate Krypton from his ruthless control. And this was going, of course, to be explored in a further trilogy, and that's what if J.J. Abrams' Superman movie had been made. So, what do I think of this movie? Honestly, there are parts of it I don't care for, I'm not gonna lie. Krypton not being blown up, I'm okay with. Like, I know some people might say it's crucial, but honestly, I think it can be done without it being destroyed, but it does open up that ending that I'm not a big fan of, I admit. Like, I get what they're probably trying to do. Like, the Zor family is typically Supergirl's family. So maybe they were going to use the sequel to introduce Supergirl. Like, maybe Supergirl would be on Krypton and she would go back to Earth with Superman at the end of that movie. I'm not really sure. John Peters actually said, the producer, actually said that he wanted Superman's, he wanted the next Superman movie to be more like Star Wars. He wanted to explore other planets. He didn't want to limit it to just Earth, which I get, but like, I don't know. The idea of setting an entire Superman movie on another planet just doesn't sound as good as it might on paper, in my opinion. Because really, even though he was born on Krypton, like, Earth is his home, and I think that's kind of an important thing for him. I think it's important that he stay on Earth. I'm not saying he can never go to other planets, though, don't get me wrong, but I think to set a whole movie on Krypton would be a mistake. This movie wasn't going to do that, but I do believe the sequel was. The sequel, the end of the movie teases that the sequel is going to probably be entirely on Krypton, which I think would have ultimately been a bit of a mistake. As far as the casting goes, Matt Bomer is Superman. I've heard very good things from his auditions. He absolutely looks the part, for sure. And honestly, I think he would make a really good Superman, honestly. I know his casting wasn't set in stone, but out of the ones I listed, he's the one I think would do the best job. Him and Paul Walker, but Paul Walker kept saying no, and, you know, rest in peace, Paul Walker, of course, by the way. But ultimately, I do think Paul Walker could have been a good Superman, but Matt Bomer, I do think, would have been my final choice if I had been making the casting calls. Beyonce as Lois Lane would have been interesting. It would have been very unorthodox, for sure. It would have meant race swapping Lois Lane, which I know would have possibly rubbed some people the wrong way. I wouldn't have been that bothered by it. I really care about her acting ability. I don't know if her acting ability would be there, but from the side of the script, she wasn't going to be asked to do that much as far as range is concerned, so maybe it wouldn't have been that bad. But I do imagine if they were going to bring Lois back in a sequel, they would probably want somebody with more experience. But then again, this is Superman we're talking about, and, you know, Superman, the original, Christopher Reeve, was an unknown. So I'm not saying that people with not that much acting experience can't be great, which is why I'm not ruling out Beyonce as a possibly great Lois Lane. But personally, I do think that literally everybody else I mentioned probably would have been a better Lois, I'm sorry to say. I decided to put Beyonce on the forefront, though, just because I thought she was the most interesting choice. Vin Diesel as Lex Luthor is something. Bruce Willis, I can't imagine, honestly. I think Bruce Willis, I know he's played bad guys before, but I don't know. There's something about the way he carries himself that I just don't think would translate very well to an intellectual villain. Maybe I'm wrong. Like, if he does like a really good intellectual kind of villainous performance in something else that I've just never heard of, please point it out to me in the comments. But as far as I know, I don't think Bruce Willis would make for a very good Lex Luthor. That's just my opinion. Robert Downey Jr., interesting. Obviously, if he played Luthor, he might never have played Iron Man, and that would have been a disaster, honestly, in my opinion. It's really hard to imagine Robert Downey Jr. bald, honestly, even if he was bald, because they don't always make him bald. Cough, cough, Jesse Eisenberg. But ultimately, I went for Vin Diesel just because I do think, as a presence, he would be actually threatening. Like, I do think that some Lex Luthors come off as a little too intellectual, if that makes sense. Like, they don't have enough of a physical presence. And, like, I know it's not important because he's not really physically fighting Superman unless he's wearing a suit. But, you know, I like the idea of him being kind of an intimidating presence, even when you know he can't, you know, beat Superman in a fist fight. Does that make any sense? I don't know if that makes sense. So that's why I went with Vin Diesel as far as this video was concerned, just because I thought he's not only an interesting choice, but I do think he would bring a lot of presence to the role. Do I think he would have been good? Maybe. Honestly, I think it would be really cool to see Vin Diesel play a bad guy. I really do think that would be pretty cool. As I said, he's got the presence down for sure. He'd be a younger Luthor, because typically Luthor in movies is always like way older than Superman. So it would have been cool to do a Superman movie where they're not that far apart in age. Especially if Paul Walker did end up playing Superman, which he wasn't going to play Superman. But it would have been kind of funny if Paul Walker played Superman and Vin Diesel played Lex Luthor. I just think that would have been funny. Joel Edgerton as Tyzor also sounds fantastic. Joel Edgerton doesn't get enough time, in my opinion, to play bad guys. But honestly, I think Joel Edgerton would make a fantastic Superman movie villain. Just like Vin Diesel, he's got the presence. He looks like somebody that could be ruthless, honestly, if they asked him to be. He's gotten his physique up in the past for movies like Warrior, so he can definitely, pack on the muscle. So yeah, I do think Joel Edgerton could have been a fantastic villain, honestly. Anthony Hopkins as Jor-El, flawless casting. Like, seriously, that is such good casting. Oh my god. They were wowed by his audition for Jor-El because he did a really good Marlon Brando impression, and I can imagine it. Like, just imagine Anthony Hopkins reading Jor-El's lines from Superman the movie. Like, I think it would be really similar in the best way. Like, I know normally when it comes to reboots, I sort of like things to be different, but I do think, having Jor-El be like, sort of like Marlon Brando, but given a bigger role, would have been a really good thing to do. And of course, Anthony Hopkins is amazing. He's absolutely incredible in everything he does. He could have done this role in his sleep. But admittedly, they did seem like they wanted him to be a more youthful Jor-El, a battle-hardened Jor-El that could realistically lead people into war. And I'm not saying Hopkins couldn't, because, just look at his role as Odin in the Thor movies. But I do think if they were going to go for the soldier Jor-El, then I think that Ralph Fiennes, their other choice, would have been really good for that. Ralph Fiennes, in my opinion, doesn't get to play enough good guys. He's most notable for playing, Voldemort, and I keep forgetting his name from Schindler's List. He's done a lot of villain roles, and I don't think he gets enough time to play full-on good guys, honestly. Because when I've seen him as a good guy, he's really likable, actually. And I think if they wanted to go for a more action-heavy version of Jor-El, then Ralph Fiennes would have been an absolutely fantastic choice. Shia LaBeouf, Jimmy Olsen, once again, flawless casting. Like, that is absolutely a match made in heaven. He looks just like Jimmy Olsen, in my opinion. Not comics Jimmy Olsen, but like Jimmy Olsen from the Christopher Reeve movies. The resemblance is a little bit uncanny, in my opinion. Not that Sam Huntington didn't do a great job in Superman Returns, because I thought he did a fantastic job, but Shia LaBeouf sounds like a really good choice, in my opinion. And Justin Timberlake, I don't think would have been that bad either of a choice. Christopher Walken as Perry White. Mixed feelings about that one, because he does have a presence. He is very distinct, and I do think that people tend to get Perry White and J. Jonah Jameson from Spider-Man mixed up a lot. So I do think Christopher Walken would have been different enough that they wouldn't make that comparison, which I think would have been good. But I also worry that maybe he's a little too soft-spoken for the role. But ultimately, Christopher Walken is yet another fantastic actor who makes every role his own. So I think he really could have brought something great to that role as well. This movie ultimately does have a lot of good things in it, even though I'm not entirely supportive of the Krypton still being a thing. I do like the idea of a civil war, love the idea of a Kryptonian language. I love the fact that it focuses a lot on the lore of Kryptonians. I think that that's something that should be done more in Superman movies, honestly. And yeah, I think it's a really promising movie that could have used a little touching up. The script is a little short. It needs a little bit more. Lois Lane's barely in the script, honestly, and I do think that she definitely needed more of a presence. If they're not going to do that much of the romance, then I think it'd be best to just save her for the sequel, which is what I thought they should have done in Man of Steel. I thought that Lois Lane shouldn't have been in that movie. I know, kind of a hot take. I think it would have been best to just focus on Superman and then have him go to Metropolis in the second one and then build the chemistry. That was how I thought they should have done it. And, either make Lois Lane's presence in this movie bigger or just save her for the sequel. That's kind of my opinion on this one. Overall, I do think this movie sounds like it had a lot of potential, a lot of sequel potential as well if they wanted to further explore more of the Kryptonian lore. It would be very different to actually see Superman getting to go to Krypton and actually see what his civilization is really like. And maybe even explore the idea of him fighting between whether he wants to be, on Earth or on Krypton. Like maybe he goes to Krypton and is like, man, this is what I've been missing. Maybe I should stay here. And there could be like a really good moral kind of storyline there. I think that would be really interesting. Or maybe he could fall in love with somebody new on Krypton and struggle with whether he wants to be with her or with Lois. Just really interesting ideas, in my opinion. Also, of course, they could have used that to introduce Supergirl, as I said, which would have been really cool. Or Brainiac, or Bizarro, or whoever. I ultimately think this was a movie with a lot of potential. And overall, even though I've defended Superman Returns in the past, there are parts of this script that actually make me think it would have been better than Superman Returns. So I am sad this movie didn't get made, but maybe some elements of this will be shown in the new J.J. Abrams Superman that's being made now. But let me know what you guys think about this movie in the comments down below. Do you think this movie could have worked, or do you think it would have been terrible? I'm well aware there was a first script that was leaked and everybody hated it, but this was the second draft, so let me know if you think that if it's just as bad as the first one, or if you like it more. And also give me more WEF recommendations in the comments down below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share with all of your friends and all your various social media platforms. And I will see all of you in the next video.